What if the most sacred instinct in you, the hunger for truth, was not a virtue, not a signal of evolution, not even a survival trait, but a malfunction? Not a sign of intelligence, a sign of misfire. Not progress, but a detour. Not strength, but the trembling of a species too self-aware to remain stable. You believe that to seek truth is noble. You've been taught that truth is light and ignorance is darkness. But light burns and darkness preserves. Light consumes, darkness endures. Animals do not seek truth, they survive. They respond, they feel. They do not ask what the world is, they move through it. They do not build religions, write philosophies, or go mad in front of mirrors. They do not need truth, because they are not at war with reality. You are the only species that commits suicide, the only one that invents gods, doubts them, replaces them, and invents them again. You are the only one who asks why, not because the answer feeds you, but because something inside you is screaming that you are wrong. Wrong in your body, wrong in your time, wrong in your place. But where did that scream come from? It is easy to assume that the desire for truth makes you higher, that it elevates you above instinct, that it sharpens your decisions, clarifies your purpose, dignifies your suffering. But what if it does the opposite? What if your craving for meaning is not a light within you, but a crack? What if the drive to understand, to explain, to model reality is not adaptive, not helpful, not even natural, but parasitic? What if this very video, this act of philosophical excavation, is a symptom of something that went wrong in your lineage? Consider, the snake does not question the hunger in its gut. The lion does not invent theories about its dominance. The ant does not debate the concept of collective will. Only man thinks of death while still young. Only man invents meaning to make pain tolerable. Only man asks if he was meant to be. Why? Because man broke the contract with biology. You began to remember. Then you began to question. Then you began to believe. Then you began to collapse. The brain, this soft chemical organ designed for coordination and movement, suddenly tried to grasp the infinite. A tool built for survival, now infected with abstraction. You call that evolution. But viruses evolve too. What if the truth-seeking instinct, your thirst for metaphysics, your lust for knowledge, your ache for what's really going on, is not a path forward, but a mutation, a drift, a fault line, a process that began but can never finish? What if the tragedy is not that truth is hard to find, but that truth is irrelevant to life itself? Why do you believe you're closer to truth now than a stone? Why do you assume the universe wants to be understood? What if you were never meant to know what you are? What if knowing is the error? What if consciousness, in its current form, is simply nature going too far? And what happens to a species when it realizes the truth is not for it, not built for it, not needed by it, not survivable by it? What if you are not built for truth? What happens then? The human being imagines itself as an apex, a conscious observer rising above the blind forces of nature. But this belief is not based on evidence. It is based on narrative. And narratives are not reality. They are anesthesia. Strip away the comforts of language and metaphor, and the creature remains fragile, suggestible, addicted to pattern, terrified of chaos, and desperate for certainty. The desire for truth did not emerge from strength. It emerged from instability. Truth-seeking is not a product of intelligence. It is a side effect of dissonance. No animal that is fully adapted to its environment needs to reflect on it. A wolf does not contemplate the meaning of the forest. A shark does not develop ontologies of the ocean. The environment is not a question, it is a response. Only an organism that has fallen out of sync with its environment begins to question it. Consciousness is not an advantage, it is a fracture. a failed merger between biology and awareness, an echo of evolution's unfinished sentence. You do not seek truth because it helps you. You seek it because the world feels wrong, and it feels wrong because you are out of place. The discomfort is not in the world. It is in the structure of your attention. People speak of awakening, of opening the third eye, of seeing beyond the veil, but no other species has ever needed a third eye. No other species has ever needed to ask why it exists. They exist because they are aligned. You exist because you fell out of rhythm. And in that dissonance, the search begins. The idea that truth makes you stronger is false. What it makes you is unstable. Ask those who stared long enough into it. The monk in isolation, the physicist collapsing into nihilism, the philosopher drowning in recursion, the schizophrenic who cannot differentiate dream from principle. Each of them touched something raw and were burned by it. Truth is not designed to be digestible. It is not shaped for safety. It is not processed by instinct. It exists, if it exists at all, as something alien to survival. The brain did not evolve to know reality, it evolved to navigate threat. It is an organ of filtering, not revealing. Perception is compression. Memory is reconstruction. Language is approximation. And yet humans believe that through these distortions they can arrive at something pure. That belief is not rational. It is religious. To believe that truth is a goal, that it sits at the end of some epistemological tunnel waiting to be unlocked, is the greatest superstition of modern man. It is the mythology of the rationalist, the dogma of the skeptic, the prayer of the scientist. What you call truth is a byproduct of systems not meant to touch it. Neurons fire not to unveil reality, but to preserve cohesion, to stabilize motion, to coordinate patterns. The moment those patterns turn inward, toward abstraction, reflection, and metaphysical exploration, the system begins to cannibalize itself. Self-awareness does not grant access to higher knowledge. It opens a recursive loop. You begin to watch yourself watching. You ask questions that answer themselves in the asking. You chase conclusions that vanish as you approach. The mind folds inward over and over in search of a center that does not exist. There is no final clarity. There is only exhaustion. The philosopher who deconstructs belief finds more belief. The scientist who analyzes consciousness discovers only more questions. The mystic who dissolves the ego finds it again at the edge of the void, renamed, repackaged, but still present. This is not forward motion, this is orbit. Truth, if it ever touches the human, does not liberate it. It untethers it. It peels away the illusions that made life bearable. It replaces purpose with pattern, meaning with mechanism, hope with inertia. You are left not with vision, but with exposure. Truth is not light. It is radiation. And the mind is not built to absorb it without mutation. Yet the pursuit continues. The mind, diseased with cognition, cannot stop itself. Like a moth to flame, it moves toward that which undoes it, not because it must, but because it cannot do otherwise. The loop is set. The code is active. The human believes it is discovering truth. But perhaps truth is discovering its limit. In you. What happens when the organ, meant to simplify, starts to expand beyond its mandate? What happens when the need to survive is replaced by the need to understand? What happens when the species designed to feel begins to know? To understand why the human organism seeks truth, one must discard every sentimental framework. Do not ask what truth means. Ask what it does. Ask what function it serves within the architecture of survival, and what failure it exposes when it appears. Truth-seeking is not universal. It is not consistent. It is not even coherent. It does not emerge in stable societies, in balanced individuals, or in fulfilled lives. It erupts when structure falters, when mythology fails, when hierarchy decays. It is the symptom of rupture, not harmony. A child does not seek truth, it seeks approval. A soldier does not seek truth, he seeks order. A priest, a lover, a worker, a mother, all structure their lives around roles, predictability, protection, repetition, ritual. These patterns shield them from truth, and they are right to do so. The impulse to dismantle illusion arises only when the illusion becomes transparent, when the mask slips, and behind it, nothing. Then, the human turns its face toward what it calls truth, not because it wants it, because it has lost everything else. And in that moment, the brain does not upgrade, it fragments. The mechanism is this: the mind, once deprived of belief, does not rest in clarity. It begins to hallucinate. It projects significance onto chaos. It confuses pattern with purpose. It overinterprets shadows. It invents meaning in voids. It builds new cages from the wreckage of the old. That is the neurochemical reality: dopamine and cortisol, reinforcement and threat. The brain hunts not for truth, but for resolution. It cannot endure ambiguity, so it invents conclusions. It cannot tolerate stillness, so it creates movement. The search for truth is not a path to understanding. It is a coping strategy. This is why the most rigorous thinkers spiral into abstraction, why the mystic disappears into silence, why the rationalist collapses into paradox, why the skeptic builds new faith from the ashes of the old. They all encounter the same structural failure. The brain is not calibrated for truth. It is calibrated for coherence. And truth, real truth, unmediated, unfiltered, unsoftened, is incoherent. Evolution never asked you to understand the world. It asked you to respond to it. Your sensory apparatus was built to distort. Your memory was built to lie. Your language was built to approximate. Your symbols were built to compress. Every mechanism of perception is a filter, a simplification, a survival hack. The system is functional, not factual. And yet, from within that imperfect machinery, a feedback loop emerged. Somewhere along the chain, awareness exceeded its remit. A system designed to track otherness began to observe itself. That was the error. The animal became aware of its suffering. Then it became aware of its awareness. Then it became trapped. Not because it learned more, but because it could no longer forget. The mechanism does not stop there. Society institutionalized the error. It monetized the illusion of truth. Religions promised it as salvation. Academies promised it as mastery. Governments weaponized it. Markets packaged it. Technology accelerated it. And the individual, already addicted to coherence, consumed it like a drug. The human now believes it is entitled to truth. It refreshes screens for it, builds identities around it. It moralizes access to it. It punishes disbelief, but the substance remains out of reach. Because the tool never changed. The processor is the same, the filter is the same. The organ was never upgraded, only overstimulated. And so the mind spins, frantically translating sensation into theory, emotion into explanation, experience into story. Not because it discovers anything, but because it must feel as if it does. This is the tragedy. Truth became the opiate of the disillusioned. They turned away from lies, only to chase a purer fiction, that of final understanding. But there is no finality. There is no place where the loop closes. There is no summit where meaning crystallizes. There is only recursion, awareness feeding on itself, interpretation cannibalizing experience, knowledge layering over ignorance like skin over a wound that won't heal. The human seeks truth as the addict seeks purity, not to be free, but to escape the noise inside. And still the system runs. Biology presses forward. The organ calculates. The loop continues. Because this too is survival. Not in the physical sense, but in the psychological. The way to not fall apart, a way to not be swallowed by silence. And yet, the silence grows, because the deeper the search goes, the clearer it becomes. You were not built for truth. You were built to believe you could find it. When the illusion fractures, there is no revelation, only exposure. No chorus of angels, no enlightened breath, no victorious insight. Just the unbearable clarity of machinery revealed. The mind does not celebrate truth, it recoils. It learns that its compass points nowhere, that questions are loops, that answers are masks, that all direction collapses into presence, and that presence, stripped of narrative, is unbearable. The first consequence is silence. Not the romantic silence of monks or the tranquil quiet of peace, but the deafening absence of structure. Words die in it, beliefs dissolve in it, identity crumbles under it. It is the silence of standing without coordinates, when language stops mapping anything real. The second consequence is dissociation. Once the scaffolding collapses, the mind does not become free, it becomes detached. It watches itself move through rituals with no conviction. It sees desire arise without allegiance. It hears laughter echo from a mouth it no longer claims. The self becomes a spectator to the organism, not liberated, just uncoupled. The third is withdrawal. And one sees through the mechanisms, the social games, the spiritual masks, the political rituals, the psychological compensations. It becomes difficult to participate, not because of arrogance, not even because of disgust, but because of a fundamental severance. Belief is no longer possible. Participation requires illusion. Without illusion, all action feels theatrical. No matter how earnest the script, it cannot be re-inhabited. The fourth is clarity. Not the clarity that brings peace, the clarity that brings stillness. Like staring into the eye of a storm and realizing the chaos is outside, but also inside, that no amount of integration will make the organism whole again. Because wholeness was never part of the design, only motion. This clarity removes more than it reveals. It strips, it cauterizes, it extinguishes the need for more, not as acceptance, but as exhaustion. The search ends not in discovery, but in depletion. The fifth consequence is alienation. Not from others, from being itself, from the rhythm of the species, from the tide of its rituals. You no longer resonate, you no longer mirror, you no longer anchor, you become unmoored. Even your own emotions become foreign, not artificial, but irrelevant. You see pain arise and know it is not yours. You see love arise and know it is not yours. They belong to the pattern, the nervous system, the chemical sequence. You are not beyond them. You are simply adjacent. And then comes the slowest consequence of all, the erosion of meaning. Every attempt to reintegrate, to re-enchant the world, to rebuild belief on firmer ground fails, because the fracture is now visible. It does not go away. It does not heal. It watches you from behind your eyes. It waits. So you move through life with knowledge you cannot use. You understand too much to believe and too little to control. You see the structure, but not the purpose. You hear the signal, but not the source. And even this awareness is suspect, because it too is built by the same failing organ, the same corrupted loop. You no longer know if the awareness is truth, or simply the most recent mask pretending to be truth. There is no ground anymore. Only scaffolding on top of scaffolding, stretching into abstraction. And beneath it, nothing. Not evil, not revelation. Just nothing. That is the final consequence. Not despair, not enlightenment, but the absence of illusion so total, even despair cannot grow. There is no narrative left to oppose. No God left to blame. No future left to imagine. No self left to rescue. Only systems, only sequences, only cycles. Truth, once touched, sterilizes belief. It leaves the mind lucid, but uninhabitable. And yet, the body continues. It eats. It sleeps. It smiles. It performs the simulation of life. Because nature does not require belief. It requires continuity. So you continue, not as a hero of awareness, not as a victim of knowledge, but as something else, a machine, infected with a question it cannot delete. There is no way back. Once the structure is seen, it cannot be unseen. Once the mechanism is understood, it cannot be rebelieved. The system continues, but the narrative that made it feel coherent is gone. What remains is not a path, not a purpose, not a solution, but awareness. And awareness is not relief, it is a weight. No escape offers itself, not pleasure, not knowledge, not transcendence. Everything that once felt like meaning is now revealed as maintenance, distraction layered over entropy. The stories we tell to delay the confrontation with absence. Even strategy dissolves in this clarity. There is nothing to manipulate when all actors are programs. Nothing to dominate when every hierarchy is animated by fear. Nothing to win when all outcomes are simulations of importance. So the only question that remains is, what does one do with sight? Not as an idealist, not as a moralist, but as a cold fragment of pattern recognition, a displaced observer inside a malfunctioning loop, tasked with enduring it without narrative protection. The answer is not redemption. It is calibration. Not the search for peace, but the adjustment to noise. Not the pursuit of truth, but the refusal of delusion. Not a new meaning, but the withdrawal from addiction to meaning. The mind, stripped of justification, becomes still, not through discipline, through exhaustion. The questions do not resolve, they wither. The self does not evolve, it is eroded. The world does not reveal itself, it becomes silent. And in that silence, action becomes precise. Not because it matters, because it happens. No salvation waits at the end of this path. There is no promised clarity, no secret order, no reversal of the fracture. The system continues, indifferent to recognition. It never required your understanding, only your compliance. The truth, once glimpsed, does not empower, it disables unnecessary motion. It burns off explanation, ritual, and narrative until all that remains is structure without ornament. The illusion of progress dies, but movement persists. There is nothing to recover, nothing to rebuild. The collapse is not temporary. It is not a test, not a cycle, not a phase. It is the end of interpretation and the beginning of exposure. To know the organism's architecture is not to control it. It is to coexist with its dysfunction, without illusion. The reflexes still fire. The system still feeds, reacts, compensates, but no part of it asks for justification. From this place, the mind does not seek confirmation. It does not perform identity. It ceases to argue with itself, not because it found peace, but because there is no one left to negotiate with. What speaks now is not conviction, it is alignment with consequence. Every action becomes minimal, every gesture becomes stripped of symbolic weight. Ethics becomes physics, thought becomes temperature, desire becomes residue. This is not surrender. There is nothing left to surrender to. The gods are dead. The system is automated. History does not notice. Meaning does not form. The center never held. It was never there. You move through patterns as a terminal witness, not as author, not as rebel, not as sage. You do not lead, follow, or withdraw. You register. You adjust. You endure. Language becomes silent where it once explained. Vision replaces interpretation. There are no questions because there is no expectation of answer. There is no purpose because the frame that needed one has collapsed. In this space, nothing is missing, but nothing is fulfilled. You are not waiting. You are not becoming. You are not part of a design. You are residue of a system exploring its own failure modes. Truth did not arrive to complete you. It disassembled the need for completion. The ache for coherence now gone. The will to mean something expired. The urge to matter irrelevant. There is no lesson here, no prescription, no model to follow. The organism will continue to move. Let it. The mind will continue to think. Let it. The world will continue to decay. Let it. What remains is a body executing functions, a brain observing its own architecture rot, a self flickering in and out of simulation. This is not drama. It is inventory. Let attention persist, but do not decorate it with interpretation. Let perception function, but do not crown it with importance. Let thought rise, but leave it unclaimed. This is not wisdom, it is refusal. A refusal to re-enter the loop. A refusal to believe what the system needs you to believe. A refusal to fabricate hope where only entropy lives. You are not required to make peace with this. You are only required to see it. What you do next does not change the condition, it reveals the calibration. You know now, that is enough. Let the world collapse on schedule. Let the mechanism complete its cycle. Let the self dissolve without memorial. No conclusion, no escape, only continuity emptied of promise. And that is the end of the error.